To make a long story short, never have a little red satchel when you're walking through a field with a bull.
If you screw up and you want to start part over, just do it because I can edit it.
I don't screw up.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't work on your car. I wasn't born yesterday.
Hi, this is the Wild and Crazy Hillbilly. I guess I'm here today to tell some of my wild and crazy hillbilly stories. This is in my hobby shop where I make pretty things out of garbage wood. In the last 6 or 7 years, I've never bought a piece of wood to make anything out of. Someone always gives it to me. And I take it and I'm able, to a certain degree, to make something pretty out of it. Oh, okay. Here's my scariest tale that I can tell. I got a couple that I can tell. When I was a little boy, probably, I'm going to say Tinley's age, my mother had bought me a pair of corduroy pants. And I thought they were the coolest thing in the world. So they let me go to, I think it was a basketball game, and it was at night. And I had to ride the bus back. And by the time I got home, it was like 10 o'clock. And from where the bus dropped me off, I had to walk at least 1.5 miles up the darkest holler you ever wanted to walk in, by 2 cemeteries and a pasture with a big black bull in it, which is another story. So the bus drops me off and I start to walk home. And I kept getting a little bit faster and a little bit faster. And I heard this whoosh, 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 whoosh. And I stopped and it stopped. Now I'm by the cemetery. I know ghosts make some pretty weird noises. So I took off again and I'm going to walk a little bit faster. And I heard this whoosh, 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 whoosh. Now I'm starting to get afraid. So I said, to heck with this, I'm going to run. So I took off running. I'm 10 years old. I took off running, and this, whatever it was still behind me. And the faster I would go, the faster it would go. I finally made it home without having a heart attack. And I go in the house, and my papa, he was my grandfather, God bless him. He says, "Why are you so tired?" I said, "Papa, there's something chasing me." He said, "Nothing's chasing you." I said, "Something was behind me, and when I would slow down, it would slow down. When I would speed up, it would speed up." He looks at my pants, and he says, "There was nothing behind you." He says, "It was those corduroy pants. They were making the whoosh whoosh noise, but it sure put the fear of God in me." Another kind of funny one is this same holler that I walked in twice a day from school. There was this big black bull that lived there, along with all of his girlfriends. And this bull, for some odd reason which we didn't know, did not like me. He would see me walking up this road, and here he would come. And here I would go looking for a place to get out of his way. Finally, I can't get away from him, so there was one big sycamore tree in the middle of the field. So I made it to the sycamore tree, and I didn't even know how to climb, but somehow I made it up that tree. This bull was at the bottom of that tree, tearing my book satchel all to pieces. And here comes my grandpa. He's got a 2x4 in his hand. He walks up to that bull and he whams him across the face. The bull went down on his knees, knocked his butt right out. Finally, he came to and he ran off. To make a long story short, never have a little red satchel when you're walking through a field with a bull. My grandpa, I'll always remember him because he took me on at a very young age. And if my voice starts to crack, just don't let it bother you. He took me on at a very young age when my dad walked out of my life. And he basically took care of me and my mom and my little sister up until I was probably about maybe 14. And then he moved off the farm. So now my mom and my sister and me are on our own. But he was the hardest working person I've ever known. But he was the greatest person I've ever had in my life. Next to my little grandkids, Tinley, Declan, Elisa, Phoenix, and Abe. God bless them all. We had pigs on this, we had a big farm, and we had pigs on this farm, and they just roamed to their whatever they wanted in the woods, day in and day out. But once a week, we'd have to walk through the woods, 3, 4, 5 miles, and check the fence to make sure they hadn't rooted their way out from underneath it and became somebody else's pig. My grandpa would always make me walk behind him, and I never understood why, and he always had a shotgun with him. And one day, I found out why. We're walking along, and I'm this little guy just prancing all over the place, and all of a sudden, kaboom, the shotgun goes off. Scared me within an inch of my life because I wasn't expecting that. And he looks at me and he says, "This is why I didn't want you walking in front of me." And it was the biggest rattlesnake I've ever laid my eyes on. Laying in the middle of the path, waiting to just pounce upon some little 4-year-old, 10-year-old, 15-year-old, 70-year-old person coming through. It would have killed me. It would have killed him. That's why I had the shotgun. I had a little dog. She reminded me of Chloe. She was probably the same type of a dog, a Jack Russell. And she just had all the energy in the world. But I didn't pay any attention to it because I had all the energy in the world. She would always go with me whenever me and my buddies would go wandering in the woods or wherever. And if there was a snake within 50 feet of me, this dog was all over the snake and he would kill it. They're snake killers. Well, one day in the barnyard, underneath a pile of lumber, a big copperhead came wandering out from underneath this wood because I probably had disturbed him. He comes out, so my little bingo decides, "I'll take care of you." So the fight begun. I'll strike here, I'll strike there, and she missed every time. But then she got lucky. She hit him, and off he took. And I never saw him again. About a month or so later, we found him underneath the bridge. Probably a quarter mile away from my house. He was dead. But my grandpa, we looked all over for him because my grandpa said, "I can save him if we can just catch him." But I didn't. But I have some really good memories of him. Another little story about snakes is me and my cousin, Bryant, were sitting on this hill, and we were taking sandstones and making wheels out of them and rolling them down this hill. We weren't thinking of nothing. All of a sudden, Barty, who was a year or so older than me, he turns around with his hatchet that he had, and he kills a copperhead right behind me, ready to pounce on. But he didn't. He died at an early age. One other one was me and my other friend. We used to ride our bicycles down this 2-track path. And we're going down this path like two crazy people. And I look up ahead, and here goes a copperhead, probably half as big as my arm, and probably 3-4 feet long, crossing the road in front of me. Well, I ain't stopping to get off my bicycle, so I ran him over. And after I ran him over, I heard this thump, 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 thump. I knew what had happened. He had wrapped himself up in the wheel. And he ain't coming out because he's dead, but I don't know he's dead. I jumped off that bicycle, and I let that bicycle go. And then we finally got up enough nerve to go over and see if he was dead, and he was dead. Tim and Chris were in my life at this point, and we lived in this little house in Pinckney, and I just loved my yard. The moles loved it more than I did. So I tried everything to catch this one, and I couldn't catch him. And I had hurt my back, and I was off work. So I'd come out in my garage every morning, smoke a cigarette, have a cup of coffee, then go back in, get more coffee, come back out, smoke a cigarette, have more coffee. And there was a mole tunnel that went right along the side of my sidewalk. Well, I had tamped it down, and it hadn't been pushed back up. So I decided I must have killed him. Nah. About the third cigarette and the third cup of coffee, I started to walk back in the house, and here he goes. You can see the tunnel raising back up. So I'm trying to think, what can I do? What can I do? So I go in the garage, and I grab a big, long screwdriver. And I come back out. Well, first I stomped on him again, but he's smarter than me. He's playing possum. As soon as I leave, he's going to get up and take off again. Well, he did that. Then I decided, I'm smarter than you. I went in the garage, I grabbed a screwdriver, about a foot-long screwdriver. I came back out to where he was at, and he was still moving, and I started stabbing it. It was something out of the movie Psycho. I've got on my pajamas. I look, my hair's sticking up every which way. I'm stabbing him with this screwdriver, and I felt like I was hitting a tree root. Well, I wasn't hitting a tree root. I was hitting him. And then I pulled it back out of the ground, and dirt got in my eyes. So, like we all do, if you get something in your eyes, you close your eyes. Well, I had the screwdriver about 5 inches from my face with my eyes closed. I opened my eyes to see what it was, and he was on the end of this screwdriver, screaming and yelling and acting like a crazy person. So I acted like even a crazier person. I threw that screwdriver as far as I could send it. It went across the street to my neighbor's house and stuck in his front yard. So then I had to bring him back home, stick him in the ground, call him a few dirty names for messing up my yard. And I brought out my BB gun. And I took care of Willie the Mole. He no longer here anymore. I worked at Fisher Body. I'm just out of the military. There ain't nothing going to hurt me. I buy a brand new Honda 504. I think it had 1,500 miles on it. I rode it to work one night. It was in the middle of summer. I got ready to come home at 2:30 in the morning. It's kind of nippy out. I didn't have a jacket. So I unlocked my motorcycle, and I got on it, and I started it up. And my buddy says, "Hey, dude, why don't you take my jacket? It's a little nippy out here." I said, "Nah." I said, "I don't think I need it." And before I took off, I said, "Yeah, I think I will." So it wasn't a quarter mile away that the motorcycle, the rear wheel locked up on it at about 90 miles an hour. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but you don't want that experience. I got it down to probably 50 miles an hour, maybe 45 miles an hour. It would slide sideways one way, and I'd kick it off with my foot. And I'd go back the other way, and I'd kick it off with my foot again. Literally tore my shoes right off my feet. Finally, it went all the way sideways, and it hit a crack in the road, and it launched me like a slingshot. I came down on my shoulder and the side of my head. It knocked me out. Luckily, I'm still here to tell this story. I haven't really ridden a motorcycle too many times since then. I was 24, so you can die at 24. And I found out that day just how lucky I was. I went home. I got the Bengay out. I knew I was going to hurt. I rubbed it all over my body. I went to bed. I went to sleep. At about 6 o'clock, my whole body felt like it had been hit with a hammer. If you've ever smashed your finger and it just feels like every time your heart beats, it gets bigger, that's how my whole body felt. So I'm banging on the wall with my elbow, one arm that I could use, because I couldn't walk, I couldn't do anything. My sister comes into the room and says, "What the hell's your problem?" I said, "I wrecked my motorcycle." She said, "You look fine to me." Well, I wasn't. The next day I went to the hospital. They did surgery on my shoulder, put pins in it, and screws and needles and Zerk fittings and everything that you can put in there. And they told me that I would never have any more than 50% use of it. I have 100% use of it. That comes from being stubborn and not having someone tell you that you can't do anything. You can do anything if you want to bad enough. And I was an active person mechanically, and I knew I had to use that arm if I ever wanted to make a living as car mechanic, which I ended up, that's what I did. Oh, oh, that's a good one. Chris was the type of a kid who he would get on his bicycle and he would go as fast as he could and not look ahead of him. He'd have that head down and he's just pedaling and not looking where he's going. Well, one day I'm sitting at the computer doing something, I don't even remember what it was, and the telephone man called me. The telephone man. Who else? And he says, "I think you need to come and check on your son. He just took on a Buick, head on." I said, "What?" And he said, "He's on the street over from your house and he hit a car. He wasn't watching what he was doing and he hit a car." I said, "Okay." That was another scary moment. I went and looked at him and he's just laying there, like he's not with us anymore. But that was another one that could have very easily taken him right away from us. Thank God it didn't happen, but it could have happened very easily. My other son, I can't remember anything about him. Oh, yeah, this is a good one. I decided after I retired I'm going to become a professional hobbyist woodworker. So I go out and I buy the heaviest table saw I can buy, and I had another table saw. And I decided I'm going to give it to one of these boys. That was my air compressor. It was kind of a battle deciding who was going to get it, and somehow Tim got it. I get a call one night, I don't know if it was from Tim or from his wife, that Tim is in the emergency room. He decided to take on the saw blade with his fingers. And oh my God, I'm going off the deep end because I'm 85 miles away from him, 65 miles away from him maybe. And I just felt terrible that I had caused this by giving him the saw. But like he told me today, he said, "You didn't cause it to happen. You told me exactly what to do when you use it, and I didn't do any of it." So, lesson well learned, I hope. I did the same thing, so he doesn't have to feel bad. I almost took off 2 fingers with it. But I survived it, and I respect that saw much more now than I did then. Maybe I found my stepbrother. I didn't even know I had a brother And it was probably 10 years ago, somewhere around there. His name's Doug. And I found him on Facebook. We talked back and forth for 2 or 3 months. And finally one of us said, I think it's time we met each other. And I said, I'd like that, Doug. I'd like to meet you. Because, you know, you learn a lot from somebody just by talking to him. And I totally trusted him. So he said, okay, I'll be up next weekend. And he said, I'm going to bring one of my buddies. He said, we're going to ride our motorcycles. I hope you don't mind. Uh-oh. Flag goes up. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I don't even know this guy. So anyway, the following Saturday, I had worked in the morning at my great part-time job at AutoZone. And I got off at noon about, 20 minutes after 12. He calls me. He says, I can't find your house. I said, was that you that just went by? He said, yeah, we're in your subdivision. I said, just where are you at? And he told me where he was at. I said, turn around and come back and I'll be standing in the driveway. I know you don't know what it'll look like, but I'll be standing in the driveway. So I went back in the house, and about 20 seconds later, they pull in the driveway. They were just down the street. So I told my wife, Kathy, I said, listen, I want to go outside and I want to meet him outside. If I don't come back, just call the police because it could get ugly. So I went outside. Doug gets off his big Harley, and he's a big boy. He ain't no little guy like me. He gets off his motorcycle and he drops his helmet on the ground. And I said, Doug, is there something wrong? He said, I'm standing here looking at my father right in the eyes. He said, you're a dead ringer for him. I said, no, I'm not. You are. I'm 75. I would have been 65 at that point. I look like my dad did at 30. Black rimmed glasses, black hair. It's not black anymore. And Doug looked like my father, which I never really saw after I left Kentucky at 18. He got really heavy, like my gut is getting really now. And one of my boys is a little on the chubby side, and the other one thinks he is. But anyway, he says, you look just like him, Marv. He says, I can't believe how much you look like him. So he had sent me some pictures of my dad in his casket. That's a Southern thing. I said, I don't want to even look at these. So I didn't look at the pictures. I looked at one. It was my dad laying in the casket. I said, nope, don't want to look at the rest. He said, those pictures that I sent you, there's a picture of Dad in there talking with another one of my cousins. Actually, it was two more of my cousins. They all drank a lot. And he says, you look at that picture and you tell me. And could have been his twin brother. About 6 or 7 months ago, I met some of my cousins down in Kentucky and I think West Virginia. And we got to talking about each other. And the one cousin sends me a picture of my great-great-grandmother. My great-great-grandmother's name was Betsy Cloud Jett. My great-grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee Indian, Kemosabe. So that leaves a little bit in me. Not much, but I have a little bit of it in me. But you could really see it in my dad. He had the long, wavy hair, no beard, no hairs on his arms. Just didn't have any hair on him, but he had that long, wavy hair, and he had those high cheekbones. And he definitely knew how to do the warpath. After a quart of moonshine, he could do anything except be a father. And that's enough of that life. Tim, the video guy here, he must have been about, 7 or 8 years old. And they always liked to mess with me. And I had gone camping with my friend from work, and as families, and they decide, it's like at night, they decide they're going to mess with me, or Tim especially. So he did something, and he took off running, and I grabbed him by the belt, and I'm holding him up in the air by the belt, and those little legs were just, they kept right on moving, but he couldn't go anywhere. Those are good memories. I have a lot of those. I could sit here probably for 4 or 5 hours. Both boys were rock and roll stars. I saw them play a lot of places. But I think my favorite one was when they qualified in the Zippo Hot Tours contest. And they finished in the, this was, I don't know how many thousands of bands that they played against on the internet, just an MP3. And they finished, I think they finished in like 8th place. They finished in 8th place, and that was the first time that I had ever saw them play with professional lighting people and professional sound people. And it always made me so proud to watch them. They played at Clutch Cargos in Pontiac. This was when, I think you were called then something?
Father Green.
Father, what was it?
Father Green.
Father Green. My stepfather, God bless him, he's gone too, but he was a great guy. I wanted my mom and him to go see these boys play because I was so proud of them I couldn't get through the door because my head would swell so much. I finally convinced him to go with me, and we went and saw him play. He didn't like the headbanger songs, neither did I. But these were my boys. I didn't care what they played. I can't remember the song they were playing, and I looked over at Calvin, and that foot is just a tapping. He's tapping. I said, "Not bad, huh?" And he said, "Yeah, they're pretty good, but I don't like their music." Reminds me of another guy who didn't like their music, who told me how talented they were, and his name was Steve Carell, and he was the lead guitar player for the Rationals. Did a song called Respect. He came to my house one day after Tim had met him, and they had talked, and Tim got to hold his $45,000 gifts and guitars and all this stuff. And he came out to the house one day to listen to him play. And I guess they had polished this set they were doing. And they got all through, and I think one of them asked him, "What did you think of her? What did you think?" He says, "Quite honestly, their music sucks." He says, "But these are some talented young men." He says, "Tim especially, because I've never saw anybody that could change the tempo like he does in a song, and you don't even know he did it." And I was so hoping that they would come multimillionaires so they could buy me my yellow Corvette. Well, it didn't happen. I bought myself a Honda Civic Si. That's as close as I'll ever get. But I made some mistakes along my life, and people that I knew, mainly of the opposite sex, that I let go when I probably shouldn't have. That's a regret. What else? I don't regret too many things. I always just trust people. This is for you little ones that I love so much. As you grow, trust people, respect people, and keep your nose clean. I know you didn't want to hear that one, but I love them, and I hope that I'm on this earth long enough to see them grow up. Best memory in life was the day I landed at Fort Lewis, Washington, when I'm coming home from Korea. And I've been gone a long time, and I just wanted to get down and kiss the ground. I think that probably, along with when my grandkids were born, and I got, beautiful daughter-in-laws. These are all great things in my life. Well, when I got my new Honda SI, that was a pretty high point in my life. I know the guys at AutoZone where I worked, they wanted to know how fast it was, because this is a high-performance car, a high-performance Civic, like 210, 215 horsepower. I said, well, I remember driving a 69 Dodge Super Bee 440 six-pack. It was like a Roadrunner back in the late 60s. I said, this car gives you the same thrill that car did. It will set you back in the seat, but I don't drive it because I don't want to get dirty. BBCB Pegpochida, yeah.
Yeah, and how to say the F-bomb. Isn't that just...
Number 10. I was so close to bringing this girl home with me. I think her name was Miss Kim. Miss Kim. She worked in the office that I worked out of. And she wasn't a prostitute. She was none of those things. She was this little farm girl gone to the big city to work. This was in Seoul. So she invited me to meet her parents. And they lived in the middle of nowhere in a little cardboard shack. But it was home to them. So I said, okay, so off we go one Sunday, get on the bus full of kimchi smell. Kimchi is what they eat, and it does not smell good. We take off to go outside of Seoul, maybe 30 miles, 40 miles, I don't remember now. But we get to her house, and I met her mother and her father, and they're bowing to me and all this stuff, and I'm bowing back, and I didn't even know what it meant. So her mother made this big spread for us. And so we ate whatever it was we ate. And then I had to go outside and have a cigarette after eating all that food, because it was really good food. I go outside to have the cigarette, and Miss Kim comes out with me. And she says, you hurt Mama Son's feelings. I said, what'd I do? I didn't do anything. She said, that's what hurt her feelings. She said, Korean custom, if you like the food, is you burp after you get through eating. I said, well, it's totally different in my country. She says, I understand that, but she didn't understand that. So I said, okay, I'm sorry. So we go back inside, and she's got another spread laid out. And we start eating this, and every other bite, I'd take a big gulp of air. And I did take another big gulp of air. Finally, I can't take any more gulps of air because I think I'm going to just explode. I got through, I said, oh, I think I'm going to go outside and get a cigarette. And I let off a burp that would rattle the house I live in. And she gave me this great big smile. Well, Miss Kim, she took care of me for doing that for her. She didn't do anything dirty. Don't you dirty-minded people.
I'm going to make you answer one difficult question.
Oh, God.
If you knew you're never going to see me again and this was the last thing you said to me, what would it be?
I love you. And I got tears in my eyes right now, and I hope I never have to see that.
Love you too.
Whew. So I get to see this before you make it
yeah.
public.
I never said anything.